Kobe Bryant played just over 6 minutes in his first ever NBA game, and a lot of you guys were asking me why he wasn't included in NBA Legends First Games Part 1. Well, we're including him in Part 2, and we're also going to go over some other legends such as Bill Russell, Shaquille O'Neal, and a couple more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alright, so we are going to start it off here with Kobe Bryant, who would retire as one of the most highly decorated players in NBA history after spending his 20-year career all playing for the Los Angeles Lakers. But some people don't know, he was actually drafted by the Charlotte Hornets with a 13th overall pick in the 1996 NBA draft, and then immediately traded to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Now, it was clear that the Hornets had no intentions of keeping Kobe on the roster, despite using a lottery pick to add him to the team. When recounting his interactions with the team's front office, Bryant was quoted as saying, "We couldn't have used you anyways." Now, seeing how things played out, this would end up being one of the most boneheaded decisions made by a GM in NBA history, but at the time, this didn't really seem like a terrible move for the Hornets. Coming into the league, scouts were in love with Bryant's freakish athleticism and scoring ability, but they were very skeptical about selecting a player that was coming straight out of high school. Around this era in the NBA, players skipping out on college, going straight into the NBA didn't have an elite track record of having great NBA careers. But players like Bryant and Kevin Garnett paved the way for players like LeBron James and Dwight Howard to be the first overall picks in their respective drafts despite not playing at the collegiate level. Leading up to the draft, scouts were quoted as saying that Bryant has questionable ball handling skills, may not be ready for the rigors of the NBA lifestyle, and does not have the body for it right now. Does not have a true position, played all 5 in high school and didn't perfect any one of the 5. Is very good at all 5, but not great. Now, despite the player that we know Kobe would end up being, it would take some time for him to truly adjust to playing at the professional level. In fact, he would not even see the floor in the first game of his rookie year. This was not even as a result of an injury. At the time, the Lakers were a contending team, and as a result of this, they did not have the time to attempt to develop talent through the regular season that they did not believe could have an immediate impact on winning championships. However, he would make his NBA debut in the second game of the season against the Minnesota Timberwolves. The contest took place on November 3rd, 1996. Bryant would only see 6 minutes and 22 seconds of playing time, and would not get a chance to put his talents on display in this short window of time. Despite finishing his career as one of the greatest scorers in the history of the game, he would finish the game with only one shot attempt that he missed. Along with failing to record a single point, Bryant would also fail to record an assist, only pulled in 1 rebound, and recorded 1 block. Despite his struggles, the Lakers would still win the game by a final score of 91-85. This trend of barely seeing the floor would continue through Bryant's first few seasons in the league. In an interview after he had gone on to establish himself as a star, Kobe was quoted as saying, "Losing to the Celtics in 08 was tough, but before that, at the beginning of the journey, I was not playing. So coming in as a rookie and saying, man, if I knew the shit was gonna be like this, I would have went to school. I felt like my coach Del Harris at the time was trying to make sure he didn't show favoritism to the young kid, and as a result, he swung completely in the opposite direction and doing things that weren't really fair. I mean, not playing. My first 2 or 3 years were a nightmare." Kobe would only start in a combined 7 games in his first 2 seasons in the league, but he would work his way up to becoming a full-time starter for the Lakers in the 1998-99 season, and the team would never look back. As we now know today, despite his slow start and the time it would take to adjust to the professional level, Bryant would go on to carry the Lakers for the better part of 2 decades, and he would become the greatest player in franchise history. Up next is an NBA legend that was more than ready to perform at an NBA level and put on a very impressive showing in his debut in the league. Hakeem Olajuwon was the first overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft. Now, it's important to note that Olajuwon was one of the 2 players in the 1984 draft class to be selected right in front of Michael Jordan. Even with Jordan going on to become arguably the greatest player in the history of the game, many still do not fault the Rockets for going with Olajuwon with the first overall selection. While he rarely sees his name come up in the GOAT conversation, Hakeem still retired as one of the most talented and versatile big men that the game has ever seen. He would spend 18 years in the league playing for the Rockets and the Toronto Raptors, but coming into the league, scouts were in love with his athletic ability and speed at the center position, his endless bag in the post, and his once-in-a-generation talent on the defensive end. Even Olajuwon's glaring weaknesses were ignored as a result of his era. He had an elite skill set of a traditional center around this era. He was a force to be reckoned with on both sides of the ball in the paint. However, as did almost every center around this era, he struggled as a passer. Despite this, the Rockets still saw him as the clear choice for the top pick in the 1984 NBA draft, and they quickly inserted him into their starting rotation. Hakeem would make his NBA debut as the starting center for the Rockets, taking on the Dallas Mavericks on October 27, 1984. Olajuwon would turn heads in his debut and finish the game with a very impressive 24 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 block while shooting 61.1% from the field and 40% from the free throw line. Houston would end up getting the best of their in-state opponents by a final score of 121-111. This would end up being a sign of things to come for Hakeem. He came into the league ready to make an immediate impact on whatever team drafted him, and he would go on to do just that. By the time that his NBA career came to a close, he would be known as the most talented player to ever put on a Houston Rockets uniform, and arguably the best big man of all time. Next up, we're going to cover another NBA legend that ended up playing for the Lakers, but in the beginning of his career ended up on the Milwaukee Bucks. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is in contention for some people to be one of the greatest players to ever touch an NBA court. He was the first overall pick in the 1969 NBA draft by the Milwaukee Bucks. He would go on to play 20 years in the league for the Bucks and the Los Angeles Lakers. Coming into the league, Abdul-Jabbar was an undeniable talent. Despite his immense size, he was still an extremely athletic player for his era. Along with this, he was an amazing scorer around the basket, one of the best rebounders of his era, and one of the top interior defenders in the history of the game. He proved during his time in college at UCLA that he was more than capable as a leader, as he was the driving force of the Bruins' 3 national titles in his 3 seasons there. Abdul-Jabbar was a no-brainer for the first overall pick, and he would prove the front office of the Bucks correct as early as his NBA debut. Kareem's first game in the league would take place on October 18, 1969 against the Detroit Pistons. Abdul-Jabbar would shockingly play all 48 minutes, not sitting out for a single second. In his 48 minutes, he would record 29 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists while shooting 44.4% from the field and 62.5% from the free throw line. It's important to note that at this time in the NBA, steals and blocks were not recorded, sadly. As we now know just how elite Abdul-Jabbar was on the defensive end, the stat line from his debut likely would have came out to be even more impressive if the defensive stats would have been kept track of. The Bucks would end up winning this game by a score of 119-110. And it was clear from his debut that Abdul-Jabbar would be leaned on to be the leader of the Bucks. Despite it being his first game at the professional level, he would be the only player on Milwaukee's roster to not sit the bench at any point. He would also shoot 7 more shots than Flynn Robinson, finish the contest with the second most shots attempted on the Bucks roster this game. While he would not spend the entirety of his career on the Bucks, he would still lead the team to a great deal of success, and would also be a very strong contributing force in Los Angeles during his time with the Lakers. At the time of his retirement, he would have the most points recorded in NBA history, along with being one of the strongest rebounders and interior defenders that the game had ever seen. While this next NBA legend didn't have the strongest debut in the league, he would go on to be arguably the most dominant player in NBA history and would even earn the respect from one of his opponents in his debut. Alright, so you guys caught me here. 3/5 of this list is Lakers players. But anyways, Shaquille O'Neal is widely regarded as one of the most dominant players that the league has ever seen. His unique combination of size and athleticism made him almost impossible to stop in the paint. He was the first overall pick in the 1992 NBA draft, selected by the Orlando Magic. Coming into the league, scouts were in love with Shaq's game and build. Despite his massive height and frame, O'Neal was still very agile and athletic for his size. He was able to defend the paint at an elite level, and his size made him almost impossible to stop when he backed down his opponents. His debut to the NBA would take place on November 6, 1992, in a matchup between the Magic and the Miami Heat. Shaq was relatively passive in his debut and was not as dominant in the paint as he would be later on in his career, but O'Neal would still finish the game with 12 points, 18 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 3 blocks while shooting 50% from the field and 57.1% from the free throw line. Magic would go on to win this game by a final score of 110 to 100. While O'Neal didn't really dominate the paint in this performance, he would still be a force to be reckoned with on the boards in his league debut. By himself, Shaq would account for half of the total rebounds that the Magic pulled in that night. Although this was a rather mundane game from O'Neal on the offensive end, his opponents would still be taken back by his talent and would give him some very high praise after the game. In his interview after the contest, Heat center Ronnie Cycli was quoted as saying, "When he leaned on me, it was like a house falling on you." Up next is the debut of the greatest winner that the league has ever seen. Bill Russell holds the record for most NBA titles in the history of the league with 11. Now this is most likely a record that will never be broken, and as a result of this, he's established himself as the greatest winner in league history. Russell will be selected by the St. Louis Hawks with the second overall pick of the 1956 NBA draft. However, he would be dealt to the Boston Celtics before he would even play a single game with the Hawks. This would go on to be one of the worst draft day trades in league history, as the Hawks would only receive Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan. Now, there are actually multiple theories on why Russell was traded from the Hawks to the Celtics, the most popular one being that the city of St. Louis at the time was extremely racist and they didn't want to build a franchise around an African-American player. Now, this was a home run for the Celtics on the opposite side of things, and their head coach at the time, Red Auerbach, knew his organization had pulled off a heist. When talking about Russell before he even played in his first NBA game, Auerbach was quoted as saying, "He will change basketball." While many pushed back on this comment at the time, Auerbach would once again be proven correct, and it would just be another example of why he was one of the best basketball minds during the era. Coming into the league, many were in love with what Russell brought to the table as a player. He was an incredible leader, rebounder, interior defender, and a selfless player. His leadership skills would be put on full display when he would spend time both playing and coaching the Celtics. Along with this, his dedication to fighting for rebounds and getting 50-50 balls would cause his teammates to play a team-oriented style of basketball as well. This would be a huge contributing factor to the success that the Celtics would see during Russell's time with the team. The debut would take place on December 22nd, 1956 against the St. Louis Hawks. This would be the team that dealt Russell on draft night, and he came into this contest with a lot to prove and a chip on his shoulder. Despite this factor and the extremely strong career that he would go on to have, Russell would struggle in his debut. He finished the game with 6 points, 16 rebounds, and 1 assist while shooting 27.3% from the field and missing all 4 of his attempts from the free throw line. While Russell was never much of a scorer and was a much more talented rebounder, his atrocious shooting percentage this night caused some concern for the Celtics. However, they would still come out of the contest with a 95-93 victory. Despite the slow start on the scoring end, Russell would go on to become a much more efficient scorer near the basket as his career continued. Along with this, even in his debut to the league, he would establish himself as a force to be reckoned with on the boards. Boston would go on to win the NBA Finals in Russell's rookie year, and he put on a very strong showing in the postseason, along with making some necessary adjustments to his game from his debut. In the playoffs, Russell would go on to average 13.9 points, an incredible 24.4 rebounds, and 3.2 assists per game, while shooting a still inefficient 36.5% from the field and a much improved 50.8% from the free throw line. Now that you guys know about these NBA Legends' first games, go check out this video on NBA Legends' last games that include some of the same players.